I must inform you that some London analysts are arguing that with this Labour majority, it continues to really double down on that promise of economic stability, growth and wealth creation as far as the UK is concerned. We've got Ambassador Prabhu Dayal in the studio with us. Ambassador Dayal, your first thoughts. Keir Starmer's party has crossed that 400 mark. The exit polls projected it. But as far as the UK's new Prime Minister is concerned, what does it mean for UK-India ties?
Well, I think that India-UK ties will continue in the manner that they have been doing. I don't expect any changes in the relationship. If anything, I think the United Kingdom will work towards a closer relationship. And I think that there are some indications which have been given by Prime Minister-elect Mr. Keir Starmer. For instance, he has said that he would work towards a new strategic partnership with India.
Yes.
He has underlined the fact that one of his priorities in regard to India would be to work on the free trade agreement. And he has said that he wonders why this agreement has got delayed. So if he gives priority to this issue, I'm sure that we will have the free trade agreement in place. In addition, he has underlined that he seeks closer cooperation with India in terms of technology, climate change, and of course, a strategic partnership. He has underlined this aspect. And I think that this will play a very important role in the relations between the two sides. You know, there are some common concerns which the United Kingdom has with India. These concerns are shared. And one concern certainly is relating to supply chains.
Yes.
And the Chinese factor is considered by the United Kingdom as being an impediment in smooth supply chains. And therefore, they are also looking at the possibility of India becoming a substitute for China in certain areas, as indeed there are some other Western countries which have been thinking on these lines. So how the relationship shapes out will be determined by how much continuity there is between what has been perceived as the attitude of Keir Starmer and how he actually implements. But I think that the indications at the moment are good, in particular because he has distanced himself from the position that was taken by his predecessor, Corbyn, who used to be the leader of the Labour Party. You would recall that Corbyn had been pretty harsh in regard to Kashmir. He had said things which were very unpleasant, and these things had not gone down well with India.
Indeed.
And neither had they gone down well with the Indian origin UK nationals. In fact, very significantly, Keir Starmer had something to do with reaching out to the Indian origin British nationals, because he recently visited the Swaminarayan temple, and in fact that is where he launched his idea of a new strategic partnership with India. And we of course welcome him.
PM who says he's an atheist.
Well, significantly, yes, he may say whatever, but his visit to the temple was certainly his outreach to the Indian origin British community. And I think it went down well with them. And there are indications that there will be an effort to work with India in a variety of areas.
Right, Ambassador Dayal, we also have company on the broadcast with us. Pratik Ditani joins us live at the moment. Pratik, you think restoring political stability after years of Tory infighting could actually reinvigorate private investment in Britain under Keir Starmer's leadership?
Yeah, I think the biggest problem Britain has had over the last decade is a change in leadership very regularly. We've had 19 housing secretaries. We've had dozens of other ministers change throughout. The biggest change that Keir Starmer brings is stability and good governance over the next 5 years. If that's in place, Britain becomes a much more attractive proposition for the US, for Europe, and countries like India to do business with once more.
Well, many say that for Keir Starmer, this is going to be a grand wedding, but a very short-lived honeymoon. Can you take us through some of the challenges that lie straight up ahead for the Labour government?
Well, I think that this is what really doomed Rishi Sunak as well. The best day of his time in government was the day he got elected, and it was downhill after then because he had insurmountable challenges which were on the economic front as well as the cultural front that he himself wasn't able to tackle. So Keir Starmer inherits the highest debt to GDP ratio Britain has had since the Second World War. He inherits a cost of living crisis. He inherits, for the first time, I've been in Britain for more than 20 years, and for the first time I can say that parts of the country look like a broken society. Things don't work, bin collections don't happen on time, there are more people sleeping on the streets, rough.
A crack crisis, less jobs, the list goes on.
Absolutely, absolutely. So these are things that one administration can't really solve. These are problems that have been created over the last decade, and they'll take at least a decade to solve, particularly the debt to GDP problem. And this has been caused actually largely by the previous Prime Minister, Liz Truss. Britain borrowed very heavily during COVID when interest rates were really cheap. They skyrocketed within the space of a few months. So actually Britain spends billions of pounds, about 40 billion pounds a year on debt interest that it didn't anticipate spending just 1.5 years ago.
But Prateek, you think a change of government will magically fill the black holes in the public finances in the next parliament, nor conjure up the thousands of additional medical staff needed for the NHS?
But I think that the problem Labour has is that during the campaign, it's been very safe in what it's said. What it's not said is far more important, which is there will be economic pain for all citizens in the UK over the next 5 years. Taxes will have to rise. There are 5 million underemployed people in the UK that have elected to come out of the job market. They need to be encouraged back to work. The NHS is facing crisis that needs to be fixed. And you can't have British people doing those jobs simply because there aren't enough British people to work in the NHS. Migration, particularly from India, from East Africa and elsewhere, has to be a key part of the solution. The problem there is now that the far-right Reform Party has got a few MPs in Parliament, they have consistently said that we want to crack down on migration. Illegal migration and legal migration, they've been mixed up in the public debate in Britain.
And many would say a moral panic has been created as far as asylum seekers, the word refugee is concerned, especially as far as the UK is concerned.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a real problem, I think, for British society. We are a liberal, a tolerant nation which welcomes people from across the world. In the last 4 years, we've had refugees from the Ukraine, from the Middle East, from Hong Kong as well, that have, not refugees, but migrants from Hong Kong once China has taken over there. So we're a very welcoming country. This kind of rhetoric is unhelpful for the cultural fabric of the UK. And this is something that Keir needs to fix.
Right. Also, Foreign Secretary David Cameron once had said that his time as Tory opposition leader was 5 years spent just banging his head against the wall. Now his party is braced to go through it all again, Ambassador Dayal?
Well, certainly there are major challenges which will have to be confronted. You referred to the NHS issue. That is something which is troubling the British people a lot. And that requires priority attention. Of course, the new Prime Minister-elect has said that he will give precedence to this issue. But it's not going to go away so easily. And as you said, this problem cannot be met only by what are the available manpower resources. And there will have to be a very close look at how the right kind of manpower could be imported. And certainly India is a country from where there is a possible availability of such resources. Now, at the same time, this migration issue has become a very big irritant. We all know about the Rwanda plan, where a lot of migrants who were there without proper documentation were planned to be shifted, relocated there. But I think the new Prime Minister has made it clear, the Prime Minister-elect, that he will shelve this Rwanda plan and that there will not be any action. But then the problem will still remain. how to prevent these illegal migrants from coming over. They cross over through, from France, and there will have to be very strict policing. So I think some of these issues are going to be there. They have to be met, they have to be countered, and of course, closer cooperation with India. If it benefits Britain, if it benefits us, I think it will be very good for us and for everybody.
Starmer has said that his party is going to introduce a border security command. We also have with us senior journalist Vijay Rana. But before we go across to Mr. Rana, we're going to slip into a very quick break and be back with the latest in a moment. Well, the last time Britain traded a Conservative government for a Labour one, back in 1997, the mood was so buoyant that the new Prime Minister, Tony Blair, declared a new dawn has broken, has it not? His successor, Keir Starmer, some critics would say is far less of a showman, and even many of his supporters feel pessimistic about Britain's future prospects, considering what he's inheriting. Yet, the scale of Sir Keir Starmer's victory today appears comparable to Blair's landslide. Since Brexit, politics in Britain has been a clown show, many would say, and today, its voters decided it was time for the circus to move on. We have senior journalist Vijay Rana also with us on the broadcast. Thank you so much, Mr. Rana, for joining us. Do you agree that a simple summary of this election is that people wanted the Tories out and hence voted tactically to do so?
Yes, you are absolutely right. The way Tory party has behaved in last few years, people were not at all happy. First of all, everything was going out of hand. NHS operation queues were lengthening. There were resource problem all over the economy. There was a cost of living crisis. The petrol prices are highest in Europe. The energy bills are highest in Europe. Interest rates were skyrocketing. So Britain has seen some really, really tough times, particularly after COVID. And the result was inevitable. And besides that, the worst thing which happened within the Conservative Party was that it had become a game of musical chairs. 5 prime ministers in last 14 years, 7 chancellors of exchequers, and 88 foreign secretaries. And nobody was, it looked like that nobody was with Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. The party elders did not support him fully. The grassroots didn't believe in his leadership. So he was a lone piper. And the defeat was inevitable the way Conservatives have behaved in past few years.
But you know, Rishi Sunak's early policy blitz, including that compulsory national service for young people and guaranteed increases to state pensions, you believe it failed to budge the polls and revealed the narrowness of the base to which he was actually appealing? Many say the Tories, the party of business, have actually become the party of retirees.
Well, you may be right in one way, but the Rishi Sunak's problem was that all these policy announcements were never discussed in detail within the party. So all of a sudden, he just announced this national service plan. Even the election, I'm sure that he didn't take party with him. And he just suddenly one night woke up and announced the election. Nobody was happy with him because everybody was expecting that the elections will happen sometimes in October. So his party was not at all prepared to face electorate at this time. There should be some credit given to Rishi Sunak that he really worked hard on the front of inflation, which has come down from 11% to 2%. But as I said, that he was a lone piper. His party, he didn't believe in his leadership. And meanwhile, 15 years, the electorate has a conservative fatigue. They just wanted to have a change. And the main beneficiary of that, the desire for change in Britain is Keir Starmer tonight.
Right, and that's what the numbers have proven. In fact, I must inform our viewers that the Labour Party has in fact reached that 410 mark. The Conservatives have crossed 112. They stand at 113 as we speak. But the Labour Party has reached that 410 mark, as was predicted by the exit polls. But when asked where the Tories went wrong, Ambassador Dayal, Jacob Rees-Mogg said that there were issues changing the leader, adding that voters expect the Prime Minister they have chosen to remain the Prime Minister and for it to be the voters who decide when that person is changed. You think Boris Johnson was a better fit to lead the UK in comparison to Rishi Sunak? And this is keeping in mind that Boris actually lied on record in Parliament.
Well, we all know that Boris Johnson faced the Partygate scandal.
Yes.
And that certainly impacted his credibility and his image. So when they changed to Rishi Sunak as Prime Minister, I think the Conservatives did absolutely the right thing. Unfortunately, there has been a lot of infighting within the Conservative Party.
Yes.
And that's now a matter of public knowledge. There have been some top-level Conservative Party leaders who have defected to the Labour Party. And there have been some others who have been very vocal in their criticism of Rishi Sunak. So this infighting certainly affected the party's morale, as also its ability to hold on to power. And for this reason, I see what the landslide has been. This landslide wouldn't have happened if the Conservative Party had stayed more united.
Right.
Of course, I must say that there are serious challenges which Rishi Sunak was facing and which are not going to go away. Certainly, the economy is in bad shape. The debt to GDP ratio is low. There is, of course, the problem of the NHS, which you mentioned a little while ago.
Net
There are
migration.
long queues for ambulances or hospital beds. There is this problem relating to affordable housing.
Yes.
So these problems are not going to be going away so easily, as also this issue of illegal migration, because there are lots of migrants who try to cross over from France. So unless there is very, very strict policing and new steps are taken, this problem also will be something that the new government will have to confront. So in a nutshell, if the Tories had stayed more united, they would have been better positioned to tackle the problems, but these problems are going to confront the new government also.
In fact, Ambassador Dayal, as we touched upon it very briefly during the break, the outrage over what's happening in Gaza. Starmer's take, do you think it's somehow impacted him and his party as far as certain Muslim-dominated areas within the UK are concerned?
Well, Keir Starmer has certainly indicated that he will stop the supply of arms to Israel. And surely that is a signal to the Muslim population within Britain, as also to the wider Islamic world. He has also given indications that he would like to see that the Palestinian state is given recognition by the United Kingdom. So there are very, very clear signals that the new Labour Party leadership has been giving out, that it wants to change the policy that has been followed in regard to the Gaza conflict and do everything possible to send a signal to the Palestinians that he will do very, very positive things as far as they are concerned.
Right, let's also rope in Mr. Rana at the moment. Sir, Ed Davies' photogenic publicity stunts, they began with the paddle boarding as we had seen in the Lake District. They finished days before the vote with a bungee jump in front of a reluctantly impressed press pack. These attention-grabbing antics, they seem to have been rewarded, right? With an estimated 61 seats for the Lib Dems, which is a huge improvement since the last election.
Yes, exactly. That's very interesting. Interestingly, their vote share has only gone up by 0.6%. But this is the best result. You know, the subtext of this election is very interesting, that how ground level arithmetic can change the scenario. For example, Labour vote share has gone up by only 1.4%, and their seats have They've got almost 200 extra seats than the last time. They've crossed the 400 mark. And the main, the villain for the Conservative Party in this election is Reform Party. They've got about 14 or 15% votes, but in Parliament they have only 4 seats. So this is very interesting. In fact, in 124 seats, Reform vote is greater than the winning margin of the Tory rivals. So it's very interesting. It's the Reform Party, which and this 15% electorate who have voted for the Labour Party were naturally conservative voters. So it's very interesting that just 1.5% rise in vote share, and Labour has crossed the 410 mark. So this is a very interesting subtext. It is the Reform UK that has spoiled the game of Conservative Party. Had they not been the main player in this game, the Conservative defeat would not have looked so bad tonight.
Well, thank you so much for highlighting those very crucial statistics. Nigel Farage has already served the notice that his party would actually be turning its guns on Labour. But let's just quickly take a look at the headlines as far as the UK is concerned. We have headlines emerging from the UK after Labour's landslide victory. The Daily Record says it's the dawn of a new era. The Mirror says, here we go. Rhyming with here we go. The Independent says landslide with an exclamation. We've got the Daily Express saying it's a crushing blow to the Tory party in an election wipeout. The Daily Mirror calling it an election wipeout. Daily Record, as I mentioned already, calling it the dawn of a new era. Mr. Rana, Nigel Farage has said he's part of a similar phenomenon to that misogynistic influencer Andrew Tate, as he claimed that there were forces in society trying to stop young men from being young men. Is this something that the UK obviously has found, and the Reform Party has obviously found an audience in the UK for this? But as we speak now, beyond that 13 projected mark for the Reform UK, do you think that they'll be getting lucky, and will they be a sort of obstacle as far as the opposition benches are concerned?
I don't think they will, pose a genuine threat to the Labour Party, but they are, as there's a term in India which is very interesting. It's called the vote katua, as we call it in Indian languages. They've performed their role, and I don't think they have a permanent role in British politics. When the things are normal, the British politics will return to its main features. That there will be 2 parties, Conservative and Labour, the main claimant of the power. Lib Dems will, of course, be playing a role, but I have been here in this country for the last 40 years. Barring 5 years, they have not been part of any government. So they will be there around 7, 8 or 10% vote share. So I don't think the permanent features of the British politics are going to change because of this verdict. These are extraordinary times. Who would imagine a prime minister of Indian origin in Britain? Who would imagine the crisis like COVID? And before that, I think the Conservatives, the Brexit was the biggest act of self-harm this country did to itself. And that was, again, a Tory fascination. In fact, James Cameron was in no pressure to call this Brexit referendum. So I think it was a self-inflicted wound that has really damaged the Conservative Party as well as the British economy in a big way. So I think we have seen some extraordinary times. We have seen a prime minister like Boris Johnson, who was known for his erratic behavior. Yes, he was very popular among the Conservative grassroots, but hoping that he will be a disciplined prime minister playing politics by rules would be a bit too much. So we have seen some extraordinary times. In fact, not only Britain, I see a crisis of leadership in the entire West. You see, in America, there are 2 80-year-olds fighting for the next presidentship. We have no towering figures like Margaret Thatcher or Angela Merkel. So there has to be some sort of thinking within what's happening to the political leadership in the West. So we are living in some extraordinary times when the basic, ground level rules of British politics as well as the Western politics are are changing, in a very
Rapidly.
interesting way.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Rana, for joining us with that valuable insight. It's always great to hear your perspective. We also have Global Affairs analyst Michael Boschke on the broadcast with us. Thanks so much, Michael, for making time for us. I mean, I don't think at this point anyone is shocked with the result. But Michael, you think a change of government in the UK will magically fill the black holes in the public finances in the next parliament, or conjure up the thousands of additional medical staff needed for the NHS? How soon can we see changes appear?
Good to be with you. I think these policies will take a long time to work their way through the system. And, what often happens in these types of elections in Western democracies is once the incoming leader looks at the books, what was left behind, oftentimes they're shocked at how the budget...
You're being polite here by saying oftentimes they're shocked.
Yeah, oftentimes they're shocked. So, we have to take that into account. But I think there will be a pressure on the new leader, Mr. Starmer, to show results, especially you mentioned the NHS, those long waiting lines. I mean, I hear horror stories from my friends in the UK of how bad the system is. Also, things like the Royal Mail scandal, which is still unfolding itself. But I think what everyone is looking for is a cleanup of, the ethics scandals, lying to the public, that sort of thing. They're demanding big change.
Well, many say that for Keir Starmer, it's been a big, grand wedding, but he's actually going to have the shortest-lived honeymoon. Is that something you agree with?
Not necessarily, because that has been predicted for other incoming leaders who have come in with, low expectations. Look, you can't even find the words to say how monumental this is after, 14 years or whatever. So there's going to be a lot of pressure and expectation on him. But I think, coming from his background as a lawyer, he is relatively new to politics. I think he does have such a majority now. You have really a great pick of, people elected, politicians elected to form a cabinet. So I think we can keep our expectations pretty high.
Right. Well, we are hopeful. I'm told Mithali Mukherjee is also going to be joining us in a short while from now. But Ambassador Dayal, Labour has stormed into Downing Street after securing their required 326 seats. They actually stand at about 410 the last time we checked, with the Conservatives actually limping to heavy losses. Many in India remain curious about what this means. The Labour, as you mentioned, has said the Labour 2.0 under Keir Starmer is looking at a renewed strategic relationship with our country, and this could be across areas of artificial intelligence, security, even semiconductor manufacturing.
Yes, indeed. Keir Starmer has very clearly said that he wants to work towards a new strategic partnership with India. And he has spelt out various aspects of this partnership. Of course, he has clearly made it evident that he wants the free trade agreement to be concluded because it would be to the advantage of both countries. But he has also highlighted issues like artificial intelligence, technology, climate change, and there are reasons to believe that in regard to immigration-related issues also there will be due attention paid to sorting them out. So I think all in all, the relationship with India will be proceeding in the right direction as it has been doing. I don't think there will be any change of direction in this regard. And one reason is that both the countries realize that there is a common good in a closer partnership. And India is now regarded as a major economy. It's already the 5th largest economy and working towards becoming the 3rd largest. So countries like the United Kingdom would find it profitable for themselves to have India as a close economic, scientific partner.
In fact, I'm told we have a member of the Reform UK party joining us live at the moment. Tarun Gulati has joined us on NDTV. Thank you so much, Mr. Gulati, for making time for us. Nigel Farage
Thank you so much for having
has actually been elected as the MP for Clacton, finally succeeding in getting a seat in Parliament at his 8th attempt. What are your first reactions?
I think that's excellent news. The Labour will find him a tough adversary sitting on the opposition benches, and our party stands for reform. We had an excellent contract set out with, we don't call it a manifesto, we call it a contract for the people. And whilst we may have got 4 members of parliament at the moment, don't forget it's a startup. In other words, the party is very new. And I just got a ticket only about 1 month ago. So in that context, I think it's excellent results. We've got a large vote share, which will make a difference. So people have spoken. And the Conservatives have been virtually decimated. And the Labour indeed has won a landslide victory.
Well, your leader has already served notice that his party would actually turn its guns on Labour. But Mr. Gulati, Nigel Farage has said he's part of a similar phenomenon to the misogynist influencer Andrew Tate, who was also behind bars, as he claimed that there were forces in society trying to stop young men from being young men. People who've defected from your party have called him a bigot, a misogynist, a sexist. Are you proud of your leader?
I think all that what you're alluding to is untrue in many ways, because the press has sort of trained their guns on Mr. Farage and indeed a lot of us. It's very untrue. Indeed, there was a vetting agency that was responsible for, getting the candidates vetted before they were selected. There are some who may have said certain things, but the party stands for the people. The party, you can imagine, you don't get those many votes if the people are not troubled with various issues, from cost of living crises to good affordable housing to security and safety, which is currently at its lowest ebb. So I think I look at, they've been called, use the word racist, but then when they look at me, I had a prime ticket as a candidate for the cities of London, Westminster. I may not have won, but you can imagine those are the sort of candidates that, sort of led the fray in all the seats. So I don't think the media has been fair. And I think we've got our work cut out in terms of making sure. They wouldn't say that now. They didn't expect him to win, as you can imagine. But he's won with a big majority. And he's got a good amount of vote shares. And so all our candidates have come second or third in all the seats.
Well, credit where credit's due, because Nigel Farage makes us realize you try again till you succeed. But in the UK, Reform, your party, sees the Tories' tax-cutting pledge of £17 billion and raised its pledge to £90 billion, plus an additional £50 billion for more spending. That's actually reminiscent, many would say, of Liz Truss's infamous mini-budget, which sent markets spiralling.
No, I think that's again untrue, because the media has, at least the Indian media, has been speaking with a lot of the Conservative members of Parliament and others, and they've been spinning this. In fact, all our sort of initiatives were costed. We believe, in fact, for instance, we would raise the minimum threshold for taxes to 20,000 from where it currently stands. That would bring out 7 million people from paying taxes and putting 1,500 in everybody's pocket. We would obviously abolish the BBC, the fees. And that's where BBC has come out feeling that they should block some of our sort of coverage and things like that. And we blocked them as a result. We are also looking at businesses where business rates need not be paid by the SMEs, raising the threshold for VAT. And indeed, immigration was a key issue, because we get a lot of people coming in, and it's an island ultimately. So we do need services like the doctors and indeed nurses. Yes. So we need skilled workers, legal workers, but ultimately you got to call the shots where people come in, through the boats. So our idea was to stop those boats, and the plane to Rwanda never took off for the Conservatives.
Right, Mr. Gulati, thank you so much for joining us. We hope that those projections do come true for your party. But Nigel Farage will be a happy man going to bed today. We also have Mithali Mukherjee with us at the moment. We've been waiting for you, Mithali, eagerly for your view. For the Tories, we know the result, though widely predicted, is crushing and a disastrous end to Rishi Sunak's audacious snap election gambit. But is it fair to say the Conservatives ended up on the brink of a historic loss, the way Hemingway described going bankrupt, gradually and then suddenly?
Thank you for having me. I don't think it's sort of unfair to say that. I think it's living history as we speak. We are still counting, and there's about 12 seats to go, but this is complete annihilation of the Conservative Party. Labour is set to win with a rousing mandate. I was interested to hear before the points being made by Reform, because they have made some inroads, but ultimately they've won 4 seats, as has the Green Party, and I hope there will be some time and space to profile that as well. Also, a very, very strong showing by the Liberal Democrats, which just goes to show that in this election, I think the key is the fact that this was less about bringing Labour in and much, much more strongly about voting the Conservatives out. And you could see that. You could see that in the run-up to the polls in terms of the mood in the United Kingdom. And you could see that in surveys as well, where the number one reason in many Ipsos surveyed polls was that they would like to vote the Tories out. And that has happened in resounding fashion.
In fact, Mithali, I'm told we need to take an urgent quick break. We're back in a moment with the latest updates. Do stay tuned. Well, in France, the party of Marine Le Pen is one step away from taking power in parliamentary elections for the first time in the Republic's modern history in a vote this Sunday. But that trend was on show in the UK too, but not to the same extent as elsewhere. Farage's 13 projected seats, well, the Reform UK is meant to perform better than expected. The Labour stands at 410. As expected. The Conservatives at 118. The exit polls had projected that they'll touch the 131 mark. SNP at 8 as we speak. Others, including independents, have actually breached that 100 mark. They stand at 103 as we speak. Mithali, you know, Nigel Farage, he's been doing quite well. I mean, 8th time lucky, who would have thought? But he has said he's part of this similar phenomenon to the misogynist Andrew Tate, who's quite an influencer and has garnered quite a following. He's also been called a misogynist, a bigot by his own people who've defected actually to the Conservatives. Someone like this, is he poised to be a bit of an obstacle as far as the opposition benches are concerned?
Well, I think the first lesson to take away for all political parties and political leaders is that misinformation comes from the top. And Nigel Farage has been one of those politicians who has made consistently extremely irresponsible remarks. Having said that, I think it's important to put into context what we're looking at here. This is a historic win for Labour, something we haven't seen since the Second World War. As we speak, they're cruising past the 400 mark. Interesting that they have done it, and it didn't quite work out in India as planned. I think Nigel Farage is honestly a side story. He has won 4 seats. It is reflective as well in terms of the seats that they've won, such as Clacton, that this is the same population in space that voted to exit during the Brexit vote. Yes. There is certainly representation that needs to be voiced here. There is certainly a space in the population that is not feeling heard, but I don't think that is the core story. The core story is the severe and rank incompetence of the Conservative Party that came to, almost sort of a nuclear fission point as people stepped out to vote. And the big question from here on is, what is the sort of economic key agenda for the incoming Labour government? What is it that they want to take on first? And I think the Reform Party will be sort of represented in Parliament in a few seats. As I mentioned earlier, will the Green Party, as will the Liberal Democrats. So what we're looking at this point in time, 14 years after having not seen this, is an extremely liberal space really in Parliament for discussion.
In fact, many say that besides the Labour and Keir Starmer, the only person enjoying the election results so far appears to be Ed Davey. And we've seen from paddleboarding to bungee jumping, it seems his gimmicks seem to have worked beautifully now that the Lib Dem leader's actually eyeing his party's best result for a century, as the BBC has projected. Dozens of yellow seats and a big uptick if we compare their result to 2019.
Yeah, I mean, look, a lot of politicians have managed to use social media and other tools quite efficiently. Actually, Nigel Farage has been one of those who stood out in terms of his TikTok campaign and how that resonated with people in terms of the views that it was generating and the engagement it was getting. I think it's important again to nuance what's happened with the Liberal Democrats, which is that they have furthered their performance in every seat that has traditionally been a conservative seat. As I mentioned earlier, I think the clear outcome over here is that it's an overwhelming mandate to remove the Conservative Party, which is why you're beginning to see growth in other parties like the Liberal Democrats. As they say, an election is for a government to lose and not an opposition to win. And in this case, it has been an overwhelming loss for the Conservative Party. As we speak, Liz Truss, for the first time in 100 years, I think, is a former prime minister who has lost her seat. The same thing has happened in several seats that were formerly held by prime ministers, whether it is David Cameron or Boris Johnson. I think it is a searing indictment of the kind of leadership the Conservative provided for the country and the mismanagement that happened under it.
Let's revert to Mithali, who's with us at the moment. Mithali, in terms of the immediate challenges for Keir Starmer, what would you say are some of the most pertinent immediate challenges that await the Labour government?
Well, front and center, it's the economy. And that, I think, has been the single biggest breaking point. The damage began with Brexit in 2015 and 2016 on the shock decision to exit the European Union. Since then, there's been sort of double trauma that came in with COVID and the Ukraine war as well. It is no surprise that the economy has been in a very, very precarious state. And I think the biggest focus from here on will be rebuilding that. Within that, I think there's a bigger story to take away, not just for the UK, but for other governments that have either got a mandate or will be heading to the polls soon, which is that there has been extreme housing crisis and there has been an extreme cost of living crisis. I think that is doubly so for those who are in the socio-economically deprived sector. There were stories and there were reports of how many more people were leaning into food banks. This has hit people at a very, very granular level where the cost of living in terms of your household costs were really going up. Even as we speak, at the start of this year, food costs were more than 25% higher than what they were in 2022. Energy costs were rising because of the Ukraine war. And I think that will be top on Keir Starmer's agenda in terms of how he fixes this cost of living crisis, but also rebuilds the economy. The other one, I think, is the completely crumbling public and social infrastructure, something the UK has actually built quite successfully over the years. The NHS needs desperate support at this point in time, ditto for public infrastructure and transport. And I think all those will have to be top of priority. There was a lot of, well, not pushback, but there were questions raised to Keir Starmer about how he was set to get a historic mandate. And was he looking to do something quite grand and something, quite large in terms of building a future legacy? But I think at this point in time, the best thing to do for this government is put one step before the other and really look at rebuilding what is crumbling in parts of public infrastructure.
Absolutely. I think you've captured it absolutely perfectly. Keir Starmer has also declared that Labour would actually seek a closer relationship with India and the British Indian community as well. After many Diwalis have come and gone, you think this is the year that the UK and India go ahead with a free trade agreement?
Well, look, I mean, who's to say? It's in its 17th round of negotiations. I think there are several sticking points over there for the United Kingdom, and they have been on record to say this. India has been quite difficult in terms of discussions with free trade agreements, which is a reputation that India has had. There is also the memories of RCEP, where India decided to step away. There are several sort of critical categories under discussion here: health, security, defense, all of that comes up. And I'm not sure whether Labour will now approach with the same gusto as they might have earlier. I think the truth of the matter also is this is not the same mandate that Prime Minister Modi had in his second term. So I think Labour will watch carefully to see how they would like to proceed. On India's side, I think they should also be cautious because visas are going to be a point of debate. this is a space where there is some sort of bipartisan agreement. There is less and less inclination to look at temporary worker visas or lesser skilled worker visas. And I think the emphasis now will be on outstanding global talent. So I think visas are certainly going to be a sticking point. This has to work for both governments for it to be really successful. Yes. And exports from the UK into India have actually been coming down. That's something they would want to correct. But I think the larger takeaway in terms of what you point to on, what's happening with the diaspora is also interesting, because traditionally, and many years back, this was a Labour voting space, or a voting bloc. Over the years, with upward mobility and better socioeconomic status, the Indian diaspora actually started leaning towards the Conservatives.
Yes.
But in the most recent polls, it was clear that more than 58% were looking to vote out the Conservatives and vote in Labour. Again, cost of living crisis for the Indian diaspora as well.
Well, Mithali, thank you so much for joining us on NDTV.